We have Ted Cruz on with us now. Hello, Ted.
Glenn, good to be with you.
The infrastructure bill, I don't want to just boil it down to our state, but I think it's ridiculous what they're saying about our state. This infrastructure bill is not about doing anything but creating good union jobs and graft, at least the way I read it.
Well, it's not in any way, shape, or form infrastructure, and the Democrats have discovered a marketing technique. So they tried it a month ago with what they called a COVID relief bill, and that was a $1.9 trillion pork-filled monstrosity, of which only 9% was health spending for COVID relief. So they called it COVID relief, even though 91% was not. Well, they decided that it worked so well with COVID relief, they'd do it with infrastructure. This infrastructure bill, so-called infrastructure bill, $2.6 trillion. Of it, 5% goes to roads and bridges. You were talking about roads and bridges. This isn't a roads and bridges. Why do they call it infrastructure? Because people like infrastructure. People want roads and highways and bridges, and actually Republicans would support a bill focused on upgrading our infrastructure. That ain't this. This is another giant spending bill taking care of all the left-wing special interests. That's what they're interested in,
so
politics rather than fixing real problems.
Who are they taking care of in this bill?
Well, they are spending money in large quantities on issues like child care, on issues like education, on issues that have nothing to do with infrastructure. And they're focused, when they address something like education, they don't actually insist that the schools be open. They don't actually insist that kids be educated. They're much more focused on taking care of union bosses, taking care of local politicians. I'm hearing from mayors, from county leaders across the country are getting these massive infusions of cash the Democrats just sent. They don't even know what to do with all the cash they're getting. And what do the Democrats want to do? Spend even more.
The schools asked for, I don't remember the amount, but it was maybe $25 billion. The government gave them, under Trump, gave them like $100 billion. Yep. Then the first package gave them another $125 billion. And now this has money in it. I mean, how much money do these schools that are not open, how much money do they need?
Well, and it's crazy. So when we were doing the all-night vote-a-rama trying to stop this last disastrous bill, I introduced a whole series of amendments. One of them focused directly on education. And it said, all right, if you want to give tens of billions of dollars to schools, fine, with one caveat. They don't get the new money unless they open. Right now, only 40% of school kids in America are attending in-person class 5 days a week. And so my amendment said they can get the money if they're open in person 5 days a week. If they're not, they get all the old money they were getting, but they don't get the new money, and that new money instead will go to scholarships to kids, up to $10,000 per kid. So if the school is closed, that kid can get an education somewhere. We voted on it in the Senate floor. Every single Democrat voted no. Glenn, it failed by a single vote. If one of them had voted yes, we would have been sending relief to the more than half of the school kids in America who are stuck at home because Democrats have abandoned them.
It's unbelievable. What's happening to our country? I mean, let me ask you this. What's the corporations that all met in their phone call on Saturday?
Yeah.
This is becoming the Great Reset. This is becoming the United Corporations of America. I didn't elect the soda pop guy to tell me what I should and shouldn't do. And I'm a guy who has always said, free market, private company, they can do what they want. But they are setting up an extra government. I mean, it's another wing.
Well, that's right, and they're not looking for free markets. They're looking for power. A very simple principle to understand. Big is bad. Big government is bad. Big corporations are bad. Big tech is bad. Big Hollywood is bad. any massive accumulation of power is bad. And big business inevitably gets in bed with big government. It becomes crony capitalism. It becomes a game of getting subsidies from the government. And what happens is big government Democrats are happy to put crushing regulations in place that don't hurt the giant companies who are all their buddies, who are all their donors, who fund their campaigns. What they hurt are the little guys. What they hurt are the small businesses. I think as Republicans, we ought to be the champion of small businesses. We ought to be the champion of working men and women, of cops and firefighters and construction workers and steel workers and waiters and waitresses and people filled with hopes and dreams who are out working. And the Democrat policies are killing those dreams right now.
So we have a story coming out that my staff has been working on probably early next week about some of the conditions that these children are in here in the state of Texas. We're on pace now for 2 million coming across our border. There was a story yesterday, I don't know if you saw this, armed criminals steal a truck full of deadly radioactive materials. They're saying if you get in even within 30 feet of these materials, it could kill you. And in the story, it was like, well, we don't know. They must have taken it by accident. No, I doubt they didn't know what was in this radioactive truck. This could easily be used for a dirty bomb.
Look, it is profoundly dangerous, and you and I talked right before I went down to the border. As you know, I brought a group of 19 senators to the border, and I've been to the border many, many times. Actually, Glenn, you and I have been to the border together.
Yep.
It is right now today the worst I have ever seen it. I've never seen it remotely this bad. It is a full-on crisis. I'll tell you, we got there a couple of weeks ago. We got there on a Thursday night. We went to the 10 p.m. muster where we just met with the Border Patrol agents and just said thank you. I mean, these guys are heroes. They're risking their lives, and they have political leadership that hates them and undercuts them at every turn.
Yep.
And so we started by saying thank you for their courage, thank you for their bravery. And then we went out with them on midnight patrol. And I'll tell you, there was just a steady line, a caravan of people walking on the trails north from the Rio Grande River. You had little children walking alone. You had young mothers carrying infants, nursing infants as they walked up the trail. They were housed initially in these outdoor pens that are just fenced off, roped off, sleeping on the floor, sleeping on the ground outside. The next day, we went and visited the Donna tent facility. The Donna facility is this gigantic tent city. It was built to accommodate this huge surge. It was built to hold 1,000 people. With COVID restrictions, its capacity limit is 250. When we visited, there were over 4,200 people packed into that. That is 1,700% its capacity. We saw firsthand the Biden cages, and these kids in these cages, we heard for 4 years under Trump, kids in cages, kids in cages. What the Democrats and media never acknowledged is that Barack Obama built the cages.
You and I saw them when Obama was in office.
And Joe Biden is building more cages and bigger cages, and they're more full. And I'll tell you, Glenn, the kids in the cages, they weren't 6 feet apart during a pandemic. They weren't 3 feet apart. They weren't even 3 inches apart. They were lying on the floor side by side, no beds, no mats, no cots, packed in as tight as they can be, wrapped up in reflective emergency blankets. The rate of COVID positivity in that facility is over 10%. It is immoral and wrong what the Biden administration is doing, and they're desperately trying to cover it up and hide it, and the media doesn't want to cover it.
So I don't think, honestly, Ted, I mean, I appreciate you and Mike Lee and a few others that are really working hard every day trying to get things done, but I don't have any confidence at all in Washington. I think this all has to be solved in our local communities. What can people do?
Well, look, yes and no. I mean, the challenge, let's take the state of Texas. If the state of Texas could secure the border on its own, I believe Texas would. The challenge is that Texas doesn't have the authority to deport anyone. And the system doesn't work if the federal government says if you cross illegally, you can stay. I mean, what's infuriating about this crisis is it's man-made. It's preventable. Joe Biden caused this, and he did it with three simple decisions. Number one, his first week in office, he announced he was immediately halting the border wall. Number two, he reinstated the failed policy of catch and release. And number three, most fundamentally, he ended the Remain in Mexico agreement. This was a landmark agreement that President Trump had negotiated with the government of Mexico, where Mexico agreed that people coming from Central America who crossed illegally into Mexico would remain in Mexico while their asylum cases were pending in the U.S. And it worked. It produced results. Last year, we had the lowest rate of illegal immigration in 45 years. Today, we have the highest rate in 20 years. And the thing that changed is Joe Biden on week one ripped up the Remain in Mexico policy and said, let them all in. And when you announce that to the world, we're seeing millions of people come illegally, and they're brought in by human traffickers who are abusing them, who are sexually assaulting them. And all of this is created by failures from the federal government.
Ted Cruz, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Senator from the great state of Texas, Senator Ted Cruz.